everybody. Welcome to round 51 of UV Gaming's The Losers Bracket, and another action-packed show for you today. I actually have a really cool guest coming up. We'll get to that in just a second. But, Jerry, how's it feel, man? We're 1 past 50 now.
It feels great. Thank you for being on this long journey with us. And for this 51st episode, we wanted to reach out to ESEA, since we've been talking about the policy. And Jason, why don't you introduce our next guest?
Sure thing. Today on the Losers Bracket, we've got a really cool guest with us. This is one of the co-owners of the ESEA. Please welcome Torbull. His real name is Craig Levine. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a complete pleasure. So, for our listeners that might not be too familiar, can you please give a little bit of an overview of what is the ESEA and what do you do for the organization?
Sure. First got into competitive gaming back in, about 2000 or so. I started Team 3D in about 2002, which was a professional gaming team, really the first professional gaming team in North America. We had corporate sponsorships from Intel, NVIDIA, HP, Subway, and a list of others. During that time, we worked predominantly with Counter-Strike 1.6, which is where we became famous, but we ventured all the way into Warcraft 3, Dead or Alive, and of course, we also worked with the now former Final Boss guys during a Halo 2 run, I believe. So Ogre 1, Ogre 2, Ryan, and Walshy. Got a broad experience through the landscape of things, and in about 2003, we started ESEA as an online video game subscription service, predominantly driven around Counter-Strike 1.6, Counter-Strike Source, and Team Fortress 2. In 2008 or so, we launched an online league kind of in response to the collapse of the Championship Gaming Series. And ever since then, the league's been growing phenomenally. We've added Starcraft 2 for this season. And we feature over $60,000 cash that we give out each year. And we typically hold about 3 events per season, or 3 seasons per year, sorry.
That's really neat. And can you detail possibly some of the things that you do in a typical day working with ESEA?
Sure. I was one of the founders of it, myself and another partner, Eric L.P. Kane Thunberg. Eric handles almost all of the technical development of it, so everything from the website to our anti-cheat tools to our kind of gaming platform. And I've handled more of the quote-unquote business side of it, working with sponsors, helping make sure some of the operations are running, keeping an eye on opportunities for us to work with. So it's been a really good balance that we've had, and over the years it's been very successful.
Well, Craig, I want to also welcome you to the show and talk specifically about 2010, because I think ESEA is growing, and you're holding 3 events a year. Tell us a little bit about your LAN events, where they're located, and what the last LAN event was, what games were featured, and how much prize money you gave out.
Sure. Our LAN events, we're grassroots, we're a community-driven organization. Unlike some of the other leagues and properties that are out there, we don't have big sponsors writing us huge checks each year. We rely predominantly around providing a good service to the community, having the community pay for that service, and then bringing in some partners in a limited capacity to help support our initiatives. So all of our events to date have been held in Dallas, which is a nice central location. It's also where we warehouse most of our equipment. Our last event was in November. It featured the LAN playoffs for our invite divisions for Counter-Strike 1.6, Counter-Strike Source, and Team Fortress 2. Our events, again, are very grassroots driven, and our focus on it really is holding a high-quality tournament for the players with a good schedule, good equipment, a comfortable facility, treating them right with food and beverage, and focusing on the online viewership. They're not big events that are held in conference halls. We focus mostly in hotels or alternate type locations, but they've grown considerably since we first started doing them, and we've got some really cool plans for 2011.
Looking at 2011, let's start with one big change upcoming, and that is the policy of having organizations pay a $100 deposit per player to be held sort of as a way to keep the organization's commitment to the player, have some money for the player set aside if they're in the invite division, so that they can attend these LAN events that you're talking about. You want to talk about the sort of genesis of the idea, and then maybe I'll get into some of the policy details.
Sure. So it all came about of trying to find a way to protect players from organizations and protecting organizations from players. Been around the space a very long time, and one of the problems that's always existed are these kind of fleeting organizations that make promises to players. These teams and players will represent them all year long, and when it comes time for the organizations to kind of put up and fulfill their end of the bargain, usually in the form of travel reimbursements or booking the travel initially, they typically fall flat. And as a organizer, that becomes challenging because now we're working last minute to help teams book travel, helping them get to events. And obviously it's just an added stress level that if you don't know that you have to plan for as a player, you can't plan for it. So after speaking to all of the players at our last LAN event and speaking to all of the organizations involved in our invite division, it was something that we threw out to them, and that they were all very supportive of the idea. The policy itself is going to be about $100 per player. So if you're a Team Fortress 2, it's $600 per season. If you're a 1.6 team, it's $500. That money is 100% refundable, obviously, when either a team is mathematically eliminated from the playoffs or at the end of the regular season. We'll issue the payments back via check or just refund the PayPal payments depending how they're coming in. And we hope that will help teams get more in bed with these players and realize that there is a real obligation here, and help the players understand that, hey, they have to fulfill these obligations to these organizations and their sponsors all year long to make sure that they're able to get that travel stipend that they're looking for.
One could say that you are entering a space with a good heart, but a space that can get very messy. I applaud you for the courage, because I do believe you are absolutely doing this because you do want to benefit, protect the players, as you said, and also protect the organizations by making the players realize that this promise is backed and that organizations have requirements as well. I'm sure people can create a dozen scenarios and have a dozen questions. I'm going to go with the few that we would have as VV Gaming, and that I would get some idea of what could possibly go wrong, so to speak. So let's say that we were to have a source invite team or a couple StarCraft players, and we were to pay PAL over a total of, let's say, $700. Where is that money kept? Is it just sort of kept in your PayPal account? Because you mentioned it's going to be refunded, and that will be held into the end of the season. What happens if players don't meet an obligation? How do you parse through when an organization, how do you protect the player from an organization who drums up some ridiculous charge versus legitimate complaints? And that's what I mean by the space getting messy. So walk us through how you've sort of thought through that.
Sure. I mean, there definitely are lots of different scenarios. A lot of them that some of the players and managers and owners have brought to our attention based off the initial feelers that we've sent out, and we've worked to address those collectively as a group. And some of them that we haven't thought of and probably won't be able to think of. So there is going to be some kind of on-the-fly problem solving that we do. One thing that I've always prided us on is integrity. We have always paid out every cent of every promised prize or prize money to date. We pay all of our LAN tournaments in cash, so the players walk away with $20 bills and $100 bills in their pockets, not 6 weeks of waiting. We've earned that respect from the teams that participate in the league, that trust that they know that we're not going to take this money and run off with it. Interest rates, on a little financial lesson for everyone, are probably at an all-time low right now, and that means for every $5,000 that you hold in the bank as an individual, you're going to earn about 29 cents a month. So it's not something where we're taking this money and we're making money off of it. It's not something where we think that it's a substantial amount of money that we're inhibiting the ability of other organizations to put their money to work for them. We think that any legitimate organization should be able to front that sort of money, and it's really a one-time cycle if you think about it. If you're able to come up with that $500, call it, for that first season and roll it over every season thereafter, it's not like every year you're going to be kind of advancing these sorts of $500 chunks to ESEA. In terms of how we're going to go about problem-solving situations that come up, again, I think we've just kind of earned some of that respect. I've got a obviously a deep background on the team side through my history with Team 3D. I've got a deep background working with every professional gaming organization in North America, from previously Championship Gaming Series to operating World Cyber Games USA. Obviously, I've got a relationship with the folks over at MLG, Esports World Cup, ESL, Code 5, every 3, 4, 5-letter acronym that you could think of, we've been behind it to some extent here in the United States. So we feel comfortable that having seen what everyone else has done, we're able to just go by the common sense rule. Now, if there's situations where it's a he said, she said, where teams saying one thing and players are saying the other, the best advice that I could give to everyone is to document the relationship. I make myself available to all of our league participants to help them. I could provide them sample sponsor contracts, sample player contracts, and at the end of the day, from my experience, 99% of situations are resolved just by clearly laying out and communicating and agreeing to expectations.
I think that's fantastic, and I think our audience should pay special note. I think a lot of times, especially for organizations out there that may be considering coming into this space or a little bit nervous, I think it is important to clearly document what you both agree to. Not only is that advice solid, I know for us, we have social media requirements of our players, and they're pretty specific, and they're also laid out pretty clearly. I think you're right. Probably 90 to 99%, hopefully, will not be an issue. Thinking about this problem, which I think has been going on for a very long time that you're attempting to address, which is how do you sort the organizations who, make these promises but at the end don't deliver? When you decided to do this year, was there an event or an issue or something that happened back in November that prompted it? A sort of enough was enough, or was there something else that sort of got you that now is a good time to do this?
There were some instances where some teams that I came across just attending the ESL New York event, just talking to players where, their sponsor didn't come through the travel funds, and one person on the team had to put all their money in their credit card, and it obviously creates a strong friction with the team of hoping that he gets paid back first from his teammates. And then we ran into another 2 or 3 issues just with our LAN event, with teams attending that, where one of our policies is to help alleviate some of those travel concerns and that financial burden that we're willing to advance. Every team that comes to our events is guaranteed prize money, and we'll advance and book the flights for up to that last place guaranteed prize purse. So we found ourselves becoming like a little mini travel agent all of a sudden, and we said, hey, there's got to be a better way to do this, because the feedback that we were hearing from the players is like, I've got no money to do it. If I would have known that I would have had to do this, I would have had 3, 4, 5 months to save up, to plan for it, to put myself in a better position to be able to pay for it. Through our site, we also allow any player in our invite division to do private gaming lessons through our system where they set their own rates. They could charge anywhere from, $10 to $50 an hour. So what we found is that by providing players with the opportunity to have to pay for it on their own if they know about it, that they are able to do that. It just, again, goes back to them being able to plan accordingly.
And this will be for all invite divisions, which include Counter-Strike 1.6, Counter-Strike Source, Team Fortress, and Starcraft 2. Is that correct?
This season is our first inaugural season with Starcraft 2, so we're only doing an open division. So A, there's not going to be an invite division, and B, the playoffs for that, as with all of our other non-invite divisions, will be played online, so that policy doesn't come into play. And it's also important to note that the policy is also only for teams that are playing or representing an organization. So if you say, hey, it's just me and 5 buddies, why do I have to send you $500? The answer is you don't. It's something that we're setting up there only for teams that are presenting themselves as organizations, and if the team is unwilling or unable to pay for it, and the players want to take the risk to represent the organization in hopes that they'll come through in time for the LAN playoffs, then it's something that the players have the option to pay themselves. Should a team decide halfway through the season that, hey, we got picked up, or hey, now our previous organization has the money to do it, then it's something that obviously we allow them to switch over and start getting represented. In addition to the deposits, we're also going to open up ourselves and our platform and our community to those teams to help them monetize our community. We're going to be doing that by offering special banner placement on their team pages, one of the most highly visited pages on our website, so a chance to get their sponsors some extended exposure. And we've also got a really cool tool that's going to be coming out first quarter of this year called Team Center, which is going to be customizable team websites. So very advanced functionality for roster management, score reporting, forums, etc., that are now going to allow teams and hopefully provide these organizations with the tools that they need to build a community, build a following, and provide some value to sponsors that they're in turn able to go around and get some financial support with. So it's important to note that by participating in it, it's not like we're just taking this money and they're getting nothing. We're opening up the relationship to hopefully offer them the opportunity and tools that they need to help put their organization in a better financial position.
Well, that sounds really attractive. Let's talk a little bit also about the organizations that you currently reached out to. Who did you reach out to, and was it unanimous amongst all the organizations that had teams and invites? I mean, I think people are familiar with the big ones like EG and Complexity. Do you want to talk about some of the other organizations?
Sure. So we reached out to, again, every team, whether or not they were an organization, every team in our invite divisions. So call it 20-plus teams in total that we reached out to. And out of all of those 20s, we received an overwhelmingly positive response. We've gotten support from all but 2 of them so far, where we're just kind of working through the details of it. Same thing like you mentioned earlier, Jerry. We just want to, they had some concerns and some questions that we just want to hammer out and make sure that everyone's on the same page before that. But we will start collecting these deposits this week. We'll start notifying teams. And there were some teams, don't get me wrong, it's not like as soon as we announced it, everyone was an overwhelming yes. EG, Complexity, and several other teams had some initial concerns, but we got on the phone, we talked about it. We said, this is interesting. We tweaked it a little bit. And at the end, they're on board and supportive of what we're trying to accomplish of it. And I'm very happy and pleased to announce that they are going to be supporting it through the season. So that's really a big step to me. And that, to me, was the first sign that, hey, what we're doing here isn't something unreasonable. It's not something crazy. The players, the teams, everyone's had a good response to it thus far. Because as an organization, by participating in this, you're going to differentiate yourself from the dozens of other organizations that are out there. So it kind of puts them on a pedestal and makes them an example to the community for what hopefully other people will strive to be.
No, I think that the tools are very, very interesting. And I think making sure that the organizations that are putting their trust in you, and not that you haven't earned it, and not that you haven't been in this industry for a long time. And as you said, no one so far can question the integrity of ESEA for always having paid out, doing what it's supposed to do. So all those things are definitely a reputation that I would say earns the trust that's asked. But more importantly, I think, giving the organizations that participate tools, advertising advantages over others, and a way to track. Do you know when you're going to release the new tools? Will they be coming out in the next month? When will they be coming out?
So it's kind of been like a Duke Nukem Forever type thing. It's something that we've had in the works for a very long time. But just recently, we've really said, okay, hunkered down and said, we got to get this thing out. I'm hoping that by the middle to late February that we've definitely got it released. I'm sure in the first iteration of it, we'll probably have a small beta period with those pro teams that'll be participating in our entry fee deposits. But the system that we're developing is tested. It's something that served as the framework for the old Team 3D site, which as many PC gamers will probably recognize as one of the more advanced sites in line with what SK Gaming had at the time, which is obviously an industry leader. And then that same framework is something that we actually used and tested with the Championship Gaming Series with their franchises. We'll make sure these sites look better, but functionality-wise, they're right on par with that. So we feel good that when it comes out, it's going to be ready for everyone. I'm sure we'll have some bugs that we'll work through with the community's feedback. But again, we're hoping middle to late February on that. And that's going to be something that's open to every team soon after. It's not going to be only for invite teams. We're going to create a system that's flexible enough to work with any game. So whether you're a World of Warcraft guild or a Halo 2 team, we're going to have the right tools that you're going to want to be able to grow that community. And what's also neat about it is that part of what we're doing is we're going to put them onto what we call the ESEA network. And what that means now is that instantly 410,000 plus gamers are going to have the ability to instantly connect on their site. So if you think about what the appeal of a Facebook Connect is on the mainstream level to a CNN.com where you want mainstream users interacting, a lot of people kind of keep church and state with their gaming world, and sometimes their friends, they don't like to share it as publicly with Facebook. So we offer a similar type solution where, hey, someone doesn't have to register 10 different accounts to get involved in a discussion on, say, the VVV forums. They could start to use one username, build that history over different sites, and also not have to worry about giving their information out 10 different places.
Gotcha. Okay. Let's move to sort of one area. This is a big year for the StarCraft community, obviously. A ton of events and attention and things going on. You're obviously going to have StarCraft 2 as part of your titles. Talk about a little bit about, Major League Gaming is going to have it. Team Liquid has this big event. How does ESEA fit in the sort of diaspora of StarCraft 2 tournaments, leagues, events, etc.?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. StarCraft 2 is definitely the hot title. It was a long time and everyone was waiting for it. And I think it's lived up to it largely thus far. We've seen a lot of the community migrate over. It's revitalized the RTS scene, and I think it's great. Our stance is that it's great that it's involved all over. I don't view MLG or Team Liquid's Cup or anyone else as competitors. I think it's great that it just grows the entire space for everyone. I think where we differentiate ourselves a little bit is in a couple of places. First, at the moment we're North American focused. I don't anticipate seeing top Asian players participating in our league. So I think it gives the North American scene the opportunity to develop. We'll also be focusing not just on, hey, this is the top 32 players in the world. This is an open league that we have. So what we do is we'll separate users into different tiered skill divisions, open being the lowest, going up to intermediate, main, and the pinnacle being invite. And what it does is it provides the players with an opportunity to play against players who are of their skill set, so they're not going to get crushed. It also gives them with a ladder and a path that they can follow and excel through. And I think that's really important of supporting those other levels so that people, what's great about gaming is that it's so accessible. It's a very participatory activity. You don't have to be 6'4" and, have some crazy vertical to excel at it. So I think that's a key for it. What we're also doing with it is that we're a league. We're not a tournament. We're not a weekend. We're not a week long. We're an 8-week regular season, 16 matches, just like you've got in football. And at the end of it, we're going to put the top people into a double elimination playoff bracket. So I think those points combined differentiate ourselves. The other thing that we've always maintained a very strong focus on that other people seem to neglect is technology. We always look with every game that we work with and how can we provide a deeper, more integrated experience for players and fans. So we've got some very cool, very soon to be released StarCraft 2 tools for our league participants that aren't being done anywhere else and that are, again, going to make it all the more accessible, engaging, and sticky from a fan's perspective. And as a player's perspective, I think provides some insightful resources as well.
That all sounds absolutely amazing, Craig. So in regards to ESEA, I know that you guys have done a lot of PC titles, and I've got a question. You mentioned Halo 2 a second ago. Have you guys ever considered possibly moving more into the console field in the future? If so, possibly any titles you'd be looking into? I know that you personally have worked with, as you said before, WCG in the past, done things like Guitar Hero, run their tournaments. Is there a possibility for that in the future for ESEA?
I think our niche and our focus with ESEA for the foreseeable future is going to be PC gaming. It's something that we've carved out, and it lets us focus on that technology. If we're just hosting events and setting up machines, we lose the ability to create a unique and meaningful experience just because Xbox and PlayStations historically have been a closed network through Xbox Live and PSN. It's not to say that we'll never do something with it, but we don't have some of the luxuries and curses that the other organizations have, and I think it comes down to budget and resources. And I think we're a little bit more limited in that respect than some of the other players in the space. I think in some ways that's really great for us because it forces us to be crafty and create a very sustainable model from day one versus if you build it, they will come, and I think that's a slippery slope. So For the moment, no, I don't see us, branching out into the console world. But by no means does that mean that we won't embark down that road in the future.
I have been often one to pick on Counter-Strike 1.6 as a title that's aged, and I've seen before. Sometimes some will complain that on the ESEA forums, I think recently there was a Source player who was banned for sort of being critical of a dying sort of Counter-Strike. And I think a lot of people look at the future of gaming and everybody's got a crystal ball, and I don't think we know where this is going to end up. And I think a focus on technology is critical because it seems to always be changing. Well, where do you see the Counter-Strike community? 1.6 Source, where do you see Team Fortress? And if you had a crystal ball, and I don't want to hold you, I want to make it clear that I'm not holding you to your prediction. It's just a prediction. I make them too, and sometimes I'm wrong, so I just want to be sure that you don't feel any kind of pressure there. But how do you see each of those communities? Because I know you've been in the Counter-Strike space since the beginning, and this is a long title that's been around for a long time. Where do you see it today, and where do you see the future?
It's an interesting question. It's a game that's been around, like you said, for so long, and I think everyone kind of sits in the sidelines and goes, it's a dead game, it's a dying game, it's not going to be around much longer, and by some crazy means it's still there. While I don't think anyone's going out necessarily and buying a new copy of Counter-Strike off the shelves, I think that Counter-Strike Source offers a great opportunity for new players to get involved. It still remained up until the point that Steam released their digital distribution sales. It typically was in the top 10 units sold up there. The numbers of peak players that occur each day that Steam provides, which of course is the platform that you need to run in order to play Counter-Strike, Counter-Strike Source, Modern Warfare 2 on PC, as well as a bunch of other games. The numbers for Counter-Strike Source and Counter-Strike 1.6 have remained very, very solid and really have not dropped off over the last year plus that I've been monitoring them, which is interesting. It's a game where it's got a very large following and that community is still there. What we look to do is, even though the game no longer has the direct developers support, that's 1.6, as it did years ago, they've created an infrastructure and an ecosystem where we're able to do a lot of that stuff on our own through our anti-cheat tool, through our custom game mods, through different hooks that we use into the game to continue to provide interesting experience so that the game doesn't get stale. And that's where competition's really key. In terms of the growth that we have, 1.6 remains our largest game. Counter-Strike Source is number 2. Team Fortress 2 is 3rd. This season for ESEA, which is our 8th season operating, is our largest yet for every single discipline. So contrary to popular belief, Counter-Strike 1.6 and ESEA is stronger today than it was, say, in 2003 or 2007 or 2008. So we don't buy into the mantra that Counter-Strike's dying. I think there's some interesting community projects that are going on, particularly the CS Pro mod that's being developed, where for those that aren't familiar, it would basically take the gameplay of Counter-Strike and make it a little bit more engine agnostic. What that means is that the game of Counter-Strike then could then be played on, say, the Unreal Engine, the Orange Box engine, or an id Engine, which is a really interesting concept to be able to ensure the longevity of the game. You know, for those console players, for example, it'd be like saying you could have Halo 2-like gameplay on the Call of Duty engine. So it's an interesting concept. I don't think they've entirely got it figured out yet, but we'll continue to work with them and monitor it to see how we can get involved to ensure that Counter-Strike as a broader meaning of the game is something that's around for a long time.
It's interesting you mentioned Pro Mod. Pro Mod is another one of those almost a doom sort of story, been promised for a long time, and this is the first time it's sort of unveiled, and mixed reviews. And like you said, they haven't got it all figured out. In an industry that moves so quickly, and a lot of those who were involved in Counter-Strike in what we'll call its heyday, I mean, there obviously is a lot more prize when you look at the Championship Gaming Series and all of that. We'll call that its sort of heyday of 1.6 without going into history of whether or not picking up Source was the right thing for CGS, et cetera, and what that did to the community. Today, with so many people focused on the new titles and new, would it be fair then to say that Counter-Strike 1.6 source, specifically at least for 1.6, those that have played it are sticking with it, and that's what the data really says at the end of the day, that people obviously have fallen in love with it and are going to play it as long as they can.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment of it. I mean, again, if you take a look at, for example, Team Fortress 2 or Left 4 Dead 2, which are obviously two of the most recent releases, for example, by Valve, which is a very strong PC developer historically, the numbers today for Counter-Strike 1.6, for example, there's nearly 4 times more people today that played that game than Left 4 Dead 2 or Team Fortress 2. There are more than double the number of Counter-Strike 1.6 players today that played today than the number of Team Fortress 2 and Left 4 Dead 2 players that played the game. So that's not even including Counter-Strike Source, which is just as big, if not bigger. So I think you definitely see something where it's a bit of an anomaly, where it's this old game. Again, it's not something where there might be lots of other people going out and playing it, and it's not to say that people who play 1.6 don't play other games, but in my opinion, what the data means is that people are coming back to the game. And the reason that I believe they're coming back to the game is because of organized competitive gaming that exists and the infrastructure of the community to read about esports, to get involved in these tournaments, to potentially attend these events, to see the top players competing. That's what's ensured the longevity of it, in my opinion.
How would you say, and obviously after having the experience with CGS, and I know I've spoken to others who've been involved in it, some people use the term they felt they got burned. Obviously, it's safe to say a lot of people got disappointed. How do you see the space of competitive gaming today? Where do you see Major League Gaming fitting into this space? CEVO fitting into this space? What does the landscape look like from the ESEA perspective?
I think it's really interesting. I think from a long-term perspective, what's occurred in the space over the last, I'll say, 4 years has been good. CPL going under, WSVG disappearing, Championship Gaming Series folding, ESWC stumbling. I think it's good. I think it wipes out those weaker players. I think it forces companies to have a better perspective on a sustainable model versus being so sponsorship driven. And, while it's kind of the growing pains of it, what's happening today is something that really should have been happening 10 years ago. How do we create a sustainable model and an ecosystem that works for players, for leagues, and for teams? And that might not be an ecosystem where players are making hundreds of thousands of dollars. It might not be an ecosystem where it's on live television. But with the way that technology is going, I think there is a really unique opportunity to build something that works from the community. And, the market's going to dictate if that's something that advertisers and sponsors want to get involved with. I mean, some of the numbers from Starcraft 2 streams, and I hate to keep referring to that as, kind of the golden boy through this, but they're astonishing. And those are numbers that, even though it's not on TV, I think they're numbers with the way that technology is shifting to more of a mobile and internet-based platform, that soon we'll see companies willing to spend larger amounts of money on it if those viewership numbers and those fan numbers and those spectator numbers are there to support it. I think what MLG's doing is great. They've pioneered the console scene. I think they've been the 800-pound gorilla in the space for the last few years. From what I could tell, like any organization, there's going to be those that love it and those that hate it. But I think overall, no one can take away from how they've helped grow the space. And I think they've done a really good job of that. That being said, they've also had now $52 million to do that, which is, a lot of money.
Well, Craig, I mean, I've always been critical of Major League Gaming because I think the challenge is, as you articulated, how do you make this sustainable? I do agree with you. I think that it may not very well be that players make $100,000 a year. I think that it's going to take time to get a buy-off, and I know you have to go soon, and I respect your time. So one final question. What, in the ideal, if it could go your way, where would you like to see ESEA in 3 years?
Man, 3 years is a long time in this world. If you would have asked me that question 3 years ago, I don't even think I'd answer with where we are today. We're a small company. We're a nimble company. We're very passionate about what we do, and we've got some very, very talented people that work with us. I could share with you our short-term goals because that's often all we could predict out into. Is this year we want to grow our league to be bigger than ever. We want to get more players involved. We want to expand our Starcraft 2 division to include 1v1 divisions for future seasons. We want to continue to grow our prize pots across all games. We want to continue to explore opportunities to involve new titles into the league. We want to grow our LAN events to increase the quality and the experience for players and really focus on producing high-quality live streams out over the internet so fans at home can watch. I think it's important that there's at least one, what I'm calling a super LAN a year. The old days of CPL were really great from player perspective, where you had hundreds or thousands of people in one room gaming for a weekend, on their own with their team or in the official tournaments. From a player's perspective, it's really neat to have, hit that awesome shot and just hear an entire, room erupt with ohs in the background. So if we could get to that point, it'd be great. But everything we do has to be sustainable, and it has to be something where we're not relying on sponsors or other sources of funding to do it. I don't believe that something's really going to hit that inflection point for us. So we're just going to keep hunkering down and do what we do. In terms of our other goals, obviously, we're more than just a league. We want to continue to explore opportunities to work with publishers and developers directly around our premium subscription service. And most importantly, we just want to continue to have fun. That's the best part about what we do. I've been doing it now for 7+ years, and it's just awesome to wake up in the morning and love what you do.
Craig, you are a smart man. It's a pleasure to have you on the show, and I look forward to having you back for all of us to get updates on how ESEA is doing. And of course, you'll be seeing our StarCraft players in your new open division, and I look forward to having you back on the show.
Definitely. I appreciate you guys having us, and it's nice to kind of get exposed to new areas of the gaming community, and look forward to future shows together.
Well, I'm going to say it first. Craig has clearly made me feel very comfortable doing the $100 deposit per player. So in the interview and the things we've discussed, I'll support the idea to make that official. But Jason, what did you think? I thought he was, it's always a pleasure because he's been around so long, and ESEA and the vision they have, of being something that's sustainable, because people pay a subscription. I think a model that works with today's world. But what did you think of Craig overall? That was your first time really listening to him answer questions.
I've got to admit, he was very well spoken. I've had passings with Craig in the past where we've never actually gotten to talk. Of course, he had helped run the Guitar Hero tournaments for WCG a couple years ago when I had competed. So I had seen his name. I had seen him around the WCG activities, might have even passed by him at an event. But this is the first time having sat down, talked to him, and actually gotten to hear him share his ideas. He's well spoken. He knows what he's doing, and as with you, I had some doubts about that $100 invite initiative that they were doing, and now he's kind of soothed over those fears that I had, and I don't feel too bad about it afterwards. It's very good-hearted, and there's reasons behind it. Everything is backed up with solid proof and reasoning, so I feel very good about this, and I'm looking forward to seeing what ESEA brings in the future.
Yeah, I think, even though, I will always pick on Counter-Strike, the one thing that Craig is obviously right about is that, when you look at what games are being played on Steam, you're always going to see a strong showing from both Source and 1.6. And he brought out something, really good, that if you added Team Fortress 2 and Left 4 Dead together, you don't get the sort of peak play that you would for 1.6 or Source. And those are facts. Anybody can go to the Steam site and check those out. So we told Craig off the air, I had mentioned to him that when we first started VV Gaming, as we were getting ready to turn 4 years old, that it was always, if you don't play 1.6, you're not a part of esports. And I wanted to make sure that we proved that that was not true. And I think we've definitely proved that. But really, I think when you look at competitive gaming, ESEA does do something that is knowing what we've done here at VV Gaming. I think the community focus, the grassroots, the subscription model, and the goal, I think all are very positive. And let's be honest, it is, the place to play Counter-Strike here in the U.S. So you can't go to MLG for that. WCG is once a year, so to speak, and ESEA is a real league. So I think, he really hit on all the key items that differentiate ESEA from everything else and make them stand out.
I'll agree with that. I will say, I hope that in the future, potentially they do have the chance to maybe look into more console play. Now, I know earlier that he had mentioned that they were not going to be console-based at all, but I did see some really cool news that came out earlier today, which is that for the first time that I've ever personally seen, there is going to be a game that is coming out soon on the PlayStation 3, which you will actually be able to plug your Steam ID into and play alongside PC players at the exact same time from the PS3, and that's going to be Portal 2. So if that capability is there for the future, there is a chance that we could see some really cool cross-pollination between console and PC gamers for the future.
I think a lot of people are going to view that with skepticism for the same reason I think on sort of Windows Live and Xbox Live. Can a controller ever really keep up with the mouse and keyboard? And if you have to nerf the mouse and keyboard to make it equal to a controller, don't you end up nerfing the skill cap?
Very true. Those are all very good points. At the same time, it's a great marketing opportunity to be able to hit so many more gamers. So there's definite pros and cons, but I guess we'll see how the future unfolds.
No, but I think you're right. I mean, it may not win over the competitive community at the highest level, but I think the younger the audience that you can introduce your brand, the better off you are. And I think that will get Steam and Valve's identity in front of a community that they normally wouldn't have access to. On that note, Jason, I think it's time to bring this show to its end.
But of course, thanks to VVV sponsors SteelSeries, Control Freak, MusicSkins.com, GamerLogos.net, and Custom Inc. Big shout out to the providers of our intro and outro music as well, the band Power Glove. Feel free to go check them out. Thanks to VVV's community for their feedback and support. Big thank you to Craig Levine for stopping by, giving us this wonderful interview this week so we could learn a little bit more about ESEA. Be sure to stop by our podcast homepage at vvgaming.podbean.com. Also, feel free to subscribe to us on iTunes or Zune Marketplace. Just search for VV Gaming. That way you can follow both of our shows, Directional Influence, our Smash Brothers podcast, as well as this show, The Losers Bracket. Email us at thelosersbracket@vvv-gaming.com with any ideas or suggestions for the show. You can also follow us on Twitter. There we are simply known as Losers Bracket.
All right, everybody. Take care. Have a good week. We'll talk to you next week.